has ever been found in the human body.
But researchers, ufologists, academics and scientists all have their own theories to explain why these extraordinary accounts exist.
We are constantly making decisions between things that happen out there in the objective world, in real life, and things that are only happening up here.
In the last 10 years, theories have been developed where we need other dimensions to explain the way the universe looks to us.
The missing time phenomenon is real.
This is not some kind of thing that happens in the dead of night to just one person.
These are the stories of the real 4400. Of all the reported abduction accounts, there is one case that has created more hype, speculation and controversy than any other. Travis Walton became one of the real 4400 in 1975, when he vanished without a trace for 5 days. As a result, he has been under constant scrutiny for the past 30 years.
I don't know which is worse, you know, that I'm crazy and strange, or that just a liar.
Travis claims he was abducted by a spaceship, which he and 6 of his workmates all saw while working for a logging firm in the Arizona National Forest, USA.
7 woodcutters said they were riding in this truck along an isolated mountain road when suddenly a spaceship hovered over them.
This was not some little point of light off in the sky. This was a metallic disc right there, outlined against the sky, totally unmistakable.
22-year-old Travis Walton reportedly got out of the truck and approached the spaceship. Walton was then struck down by a bluish flash of light.
I just felt this shock go through my body. It was just kind of like an electrical shock, but I blacked out just instantly.
Frightened, his companions drove away. When they returned a short time later, Walton was gone.
Travis's initial disappearance sparked a murder investigation, but the men's UFO stories combined with Travis's eventual return created an even bigger story that the media lapped up.
Did they communicate to you, or did you try to communicate with them?
Well, I tried to communicate with them, but there was no answer. They never talked to me or anything.
The media circus was just incredible in town, just like things you see in the movies or something, you know.
Just doesn't sound like a true tale to me.
I do think he had an experience of some kind.
Reporters stomping through the flower beds, looking through the windows, you know, ambushing people when they come out of their houses, that sort of thing.
I've always thought there could be UFOs, but that story's kind of far-fetched.
Seeing's believing, and I haven't seen it.
You've seen them?
Yeah.
Around here?
We've seen from 3 to 7 in the sky at night.
They accused me of ducking the media. And then when I finally gave interviews, I'm accused of being a publicity seeker. So I couldn't win, you know?
The story turned Travis into the first alien abductee celebrity and ultimately earned him huge notoriety plus a book and a Hollywood movie deal.
A lot of people think the motivation is attention-seeking or financial, but I'd have to say overall, movie and book included, the net effect has been negative in a financial sense and certainly in a quality of life sense. I don't want to be the bug in the jar anymore, you know. I don't want that kind of scrutiny. I'd like to just get on with my life and if it was something like that was to happen again, I wouldn't say anything to anybody.
Travis's experience is a clear example of the stigma attached to this subject. While the media enjoy ridiculing these accounts, a growing number of academics and scientists believe these reports require serious investigation.
These kind of reports of alien abduction and alien contact have been made for decades now. And it's only relatively recently that people have tried to explain what might be going on. And what we, I think, can quite safely say from recent research is that whatever is going on, these people are not just making it up, they're not just lying, they are sincere in their claims.
Chris French is Europe's leading psychologist studying the alien abduction phenomenon and has just published a paper exploring the contact experience.
Now, either people really are being abducted by aliens, or alternatively, it's a very, very interesting psychological phenomenon, and we can learn a lot about human psychology by taking it seriously and studying it.
The first reported abduction case occurred in 1961 in the White Mountains, USA, and was followed by countless claims across the states.
And just as we started down the woods, well, it went up through the trees. Looked like a big cigar shape with light lit from both ends.
It looked to me like a flying saucer.
With so many accounts coming from just one country, it was initially believed that this was a cultural phenomenon and so couldn't be real.
The reason that we hear more about it here in the United States is because we have an organization and a group of people who are willing to take this seriously so that there's someone to whom a person can report their experiences.
Bud Hopkins started researching this subject in the 70s and is considered by many to be the founder and godfather of this movement.
I've worked with between 500 and 600 people. A prominent NASA engineer, physicists. I still receive probably 3 potential cases that deserve investigation every week. This is not some kind of thing that happens in the dead of night to just one person.
But it's not just America where these accounts have been reported and investigated. The British government first set up the Flying Saucer Working Party in 1950 by the then scientific advisor, Sir Henry Tizard. And the MOD has maintained an interest in this area ever since.
Between 1991 and 1994, I ran the British government's UFO project at the Ministry of Defence. That's how I became involved in UFO research, and through that, I got involved in looking at the whole alien abduction mystery. I've looked, I guess, at about 100 cases of people who claim to have been abducted by aliens. They're not mad, they're for real. Something absolutely bizarre has happened to these people, I've got no doubt about it.
It's only as serious research has been made public that many abductees have had the courage to come forward.
I opened up a book called Encounters by Dr. Edith Fiore, and in the back of the book was a listing of therapists and psychologists who work with people who had had my experience.
Michael Carter, a hospital chaplain, had what is known as the classic abduction experience in 1994 while at home in bed.
I got up and I looked up and there was a being sitting on the edge of my bed, just staring at me. And my room was lit up. It was lit up like it was daytime. I pulled the covers over my head and hoped it would go away. When I did that, I heard this like a whirlwind in my ear and the temperature changed. That was the first encounter. Even to this day, I'm afraid to go to bed with the lights out.
With the majority of reported abduction cases occurring between the hours of 10 p.m. and 8 a.m., most skeptics argue that a common sleep disorder called sleep paralysis may be at the root of these experiences.
Sleep certainly isn't simple. There are a lot of different stages. It's a complex process. There are lots of chemicals involved, a lot of physiology involved, and lots of things can go wrong with it.
Dr. Chris Ijikowski is director of the British Sleep Assessment and Advisory Service. He has combined his research of sleep with studies into fear and anxiety.
Sleep paralysis is when you wake up out of sleep and find that you can't move. For some people, breathing might be impaired. You start to get this amazing sense of that you're dying. You're frightened partly because you've come out of rapid eye movement sleep, so the physiology is out of control. Heart rate, breathing, everything like that is out of control. Your sensory systems haven't switched on properly yet, so there's all kinds of hallucinatory activity. So you can end up with visual hallucinations. You can end up with auditory hallucinations, odd sounds and things. Everybody will experience it at least once in a lifetime. If you experience it a couple of times, then you may start to wonder what's going on. If you experience it more than that, then you really get to worry.
Now, if you had some kind of an experience like that, you might hear voices or footsteps or mechanical noises. You might see lights moving around the room. You may then come across ufologists who tell you, well, actually, you've probably been abducted by aliens and they've wiped your memory for the rest of this.
For sleep paralysis, which is now the explanation du jour, it's the current one, they've had to stretch the meaning to things like micro-sleep, where being asleep is defined as being awake.
Professor David Jacobs is director of the International Center for Abduction Research. He's a leading academic who's been researching the UFO and alien abduction mystery for over 30 years.
Of the 900 cases that I have looked at, more than half, or as many as half, take place when a person is not asleep.
Skeptics use sleep paralysis to explain the majority of classic abduction accounts. But it does little to make sense of reports that take place when individuals are awake or when they involve groups of people being taken together.
I was aware of feeling so relaxed, like I couldn't move, but I wasn't really bothered that I couldn't move.
You'd be happy just to sit there and look at it forever, or just want it to land and go away with it.
Rachel Devereaux is a 35-year-old shop manager from Lancaster, England, who had her first missing time experience only 3 months ago. What makes her account exceptional is that it was shared by her mother Anne and her 2 sons Alexandra and Benjamin.
We've been to the Little Chef and we just had our tea there, an evening meal. We left there about 5:30. I remember looking at the clock, so I was thinking it was about 5:20 because I thought I've got my ironing to do, I need to get home.
Benjamin was in the furthest corner of the car and my nana was in just behind me.
The boys were chatting and we remember commenting on the chimneys. The silhouette of the chimneys really stood out against the sky. You know, when I think about it, that's the last thing I can remember. The next thing I remember is just seeing this awesome bright light.
I saw it going up and then it hovered right above the car.
It doesn't make sense even, when I talk about it, but we all felt that it was like just this absolutely overwhelming love that you just felt from it.
You'd be happy just to sit there and look at it forever, or just want it to land and go away with it. Yeah. And leave everything else behind. It was hovering for a bit and came in front of the car and hovered, then all of a sudden it shot off.
Then it was like, all of a sudden, and then I was driving and the noise was back.
You felt this feeling of loss when it had gone because you wanted that feeling that it gave you. You wanted it back again. Going from the Little Chef to our house should have taken about 20 minutes, and it's taken us 1 hour and 20 minutes.
There's facts that I've gone over and over and over in my head and tried to rationalise and tried to fit into what we know as the world today and everything, and it just doesn't fit.
While each abduction account has its own peculiarities, psychologists believe the way in which we process memories could play an important role in understanding these incredible reports.
We are constantly making decisions between things that happen out there in the objective world, in real life, and things that are only happening up here. A lot of what we take to be genuine memories. Often, the whole thing is completely fabricated and false, but it feels just the same as a real memory. An everyday example would be, did you lock the back door, or did you just think about locking the back door? And it's frighteningly easy to implant false memories in a sizable minority of the population. For example, if you show people a photograph which is actually being computer generated of them from their childhood going on a balloon ride, and this photograph is in with lots of photographs from things in their childhood which really did take place, a sizable minority will actually quite happily tell you about the time they went up in a hot air balloon when they were 6, even though that event never actually took place. We do know that we're all potentially prone to these false memories, much more so than we would ever have once guessed.
False memory syndrome is based on the idea that memory is faulty. And memory is faulty. Obviously, I'm living proof that memory is faulty the older I get. The fact is, though, that memory is not so faulty that people are going to forget entire events. They might get details wrong. They might get their chronology out of order a little bit. But the fact that they were, for example, in a train crash or something like that, they're not going to forget that event. Without anecdotal evidence, without human memory, without the ability to retrieve memories, we would not have a judicial system and a civilization would grind to a halt.
Psychologists have developed a wide range of plausible theories to explain why individuals believe they've been abducted by aliens. But all of them have ultimately been countered by ufologists.
It has ranged from simply lying to psychosis, it's mass hallucination, it's mass hysteria. It goes on and on and on. There is no end to it.
However, skeptics believe there is one simple factor that makes their case watertight.
As a scientist, I'm interested in the question of whether or not there is anything happening here in terms of objective reality. If there's no way of us being able to produce any kind of evidence, hard physical evidence, then I'd say that what we're looking at is essentially a psychological phenomenon.
In order to really challenge the skeptic's argument, ufologists need to find evidence that can stand up to scientific scrutiny. In France, one of the Real 4400 believe they may hold the proof ufologists have been looking for.
Je me considère absolument rationnel, à la fois dans les activités et dans les pensées que j'ai.
Eric Julien is a retired pilot and air traffic controller whose career involved making tough decisions while under immense pressure.
Pour exercer le métier qui demande une stabilité psychologique extrêmement importante, tant pour être pilote que pour être contrôleur aérien.
Over the past 15 years, Eric claims to have had a variety of extraterrestrial experiences, both at home and at work.
C'est également le contact radar d'un target sur mon scope radar lorsque j'étais contrôleur aérien dans l'armée de l'air, qui allait de l'est vers l'ouest à 28 000 km/h.
As well as sightings, Eric claims to have had regular contact and communication with alien beings that have given him a clear understanding of their technology.
C'est que nos outils scientifiques de preuve sont limités à l'espace matériel de la réalité. Et c'est toute la difficulté que nous avons à comprendre le comportement des extraterrestres précisément.
After enduring years of abduction experiences, Eric believes he has recently been left with solid evidence of their visits.
Un élément de preuve qui peut être apporté donc à la science, c'est l'apparition soudaine en l'espace. You see it? Pourrait être un implant qui a été posé par des extraterrestres au cours d'une nuit.
Eric's lump provides science with something tangible it can test. But Bud Hopkins believes his 30 years of research has already unearthed all the evidence that anyone would need.
The skeptics are fond of saying there's no physical evidence. What the skeptics are saying, gee, I haven't heard of any because I haven't looked into it. Okay, these are some of the photographs of scoop marks that turn up again and again. I may have seen 100 of these. Why don't the critics recognize it? It's because they don't even know anything about it.
Bud has collected photographs of abductees who claim their experience left them with abnormal scars.
This is on a man's back. Here's another one on the front of the shin. This is one on a little boy that turned up overnight. He was 5 years old. I had one case where there were 3 young women involved in an abduction experience, and at the end of it, each one had a scoop mark in exactly the same place. The doctors who have looked at these things have told me that they most closely resemble the scars from punch biopsies. Sometimes they will take 2 samples. A person is re-abducted and another sample is taken. Sometimes people remember the tool that was used. One can infer without much difficulty that they're taking a flesh sample to take from us our own DNA, our own physical genetic makeup. Again, these are marks which turn up again and again, but we have no explanation of exactly why they are taking this flesh, except obviously they're getting some kind of sample.
Eric has come to London to visit a leading ear, nose and throat specialist and have the lump behind his ear tested.
Hello.
Hello, this is Eric Julien to see Dr. Patel, please.
Come on in.
He's hoping the results will make sense of his belief that the lump is in fact an alien implant.
C'est peut-être une découverte étonnante et qui pourra intéresser beaucoup de gens. Glad to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Okay, let's take a look at this lump. It's not tender at all if I was to touch it like this, not causing any pain or discomfort.
No. Et que ce qui est le plus étrange dans cet implant, c'est qu'il bouge tout seul. Il a bougé de 12 mm en 6 mois.
Just turn your head slightly away from me.
Et je ne connais pas de corps organique dans le corps humain qui puisse faire ce type d'exploit.
This could be easy to diagnose further by doing a couple of tests. And I propose that we do an ultrasound of this area and a plain X-ray, and that should give us a lot more information.
One of the reasons why Eric believes his lump is an implant is due to the nature of his experiences that took place in the summer of 2003.
Hello, Mr. Julian. Alice McLean, I'm the radiologist.
Parmi les expériences que j'ai connues, il y avait des expériences médicales.
You've got a lump or a problem behind your ear, I understand.
Yes,
okay.
that's here. J'étais donc souvent allongé sur une espèce de lit dans une salle qui ressemblait à celle d'un dentiste et j'ai plusieurs fois connu des expériences de sondes au-dessus du crâne et dessus sur le front.
All right, that's probably all we need.
Once the ultrasound and X-ray results are processed and evaluated,
Eric Julian, post-auricular ultrasound.
The consultant will be able to provide Eric with a clear diagnosis of his lump. Experience. Rachel, Anne and the boys were left confused by what it was they experienced.
The next day we talked about it again and you just wanted to know who else had seen it, but you just didn't know how to find that out. And you know, we talked about a number of things and Mum came up with the idea of phoning the radio station, the local radio station.
A family from North Lancashire have been describing how they saw a mysterious light in the sky last night. Rachel Devereux was driving on the moors between Ingleton and Bentham with her 2 children and her mother, Anne. They all saw a bright light move at great speed and change directions. Anne says she's never seen anything like it before.
This was like a really, really bright, pure white light in a perfect ball shape. No trails, nothing.
Lots of people say, well, a few people have said they see this light seriously. Keith near Clitheroe, Vera in Clitheroe, and Ian in Fenniscoles.
A local UFO group also heard the family's story and made contact.
I got in touch with Anne first. I phoned her up, and that was shortly after they first saw the light. And she was very euphoric about it. She was just wanting to know what it was, really.
The UFO group were able to help Rachel and Anne document the events of the night, but the emotional support they could offer was limited.
We're a local UFO group. We're not professionally qualified at all. And I think it would be quite difficult for someone to go to their MP, the GP. There isn't anyone who can deal with people who've got a strange experience like this. I think they will want to get answers to what happened to them during that time. Whether they will do is open to question.
You've got all these different factors in your life that are just a complete mystery.
It's helplessness. And it makes you cry. Because you don't know how to stop it. You don't know what it was. I mean, it's making me cry now. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm crying. If you start to think about it like we are now, it becomes overwhelming. And you can't cope with it. I mean, they can mock you, the skeptics can say, oh, you've all got false memories and you all imagined it. But I know I didn't, because I know how it's made me feel inside.
More than anything, it's just wanting to make sense of it. That's the feeling it gives you. Just wanting more knowledge and wanting to make everything fit into place in a way that you can understand.
While these experiences often create feelings of fear and anxiety, not everyone who reports them find them distressing. In fact, many believe their contact with extraterrestrial beings has ultimately enriched their lives.
My first really conscious memory of my experiences with extraterrestrials was from about the age of 3 years old, where I would be meeting, I guess, like my other family. They were no different to me. I just saw them as my star family, like, you know, and my parents here were my Earth family.
Tracy Taylor grew up in Perth, Western Australia, and claims to have had regular experiences that involved tests on her body and information put into her mind.
I think I learned pretty quick not to talk about it. I think I just focused it into my schoolwork and used the knowledge and the understandings that I had to do well at school.
Tracy's experiences intensified through her teens until she got to the point where she felt she needed to take control of what was going on.
I had to question my own sanity, basically. So I went along to visit psychiatrists, psychologists, asked for my brain to be scanned. I'm ready to think, they're going to take me off to the hospital in a minute. The brain scans showed up to be normal, all the psychological tests showed up to be fine. One of them walked up to me and said, is there anything really negative about this? And I said, well, not really, but it's hard to integrate into my life. And he said, well, good luck with it. I was just, what? Okay, this is confirmation for me, all right. And that was the end of it. I just walked out of there and thought, okay, I'll get on with it. I'll accept it.
Tracy now integrates her experiences into the rest of her life and focuses on the positive aspects they've brought her.
Also just prints.
Fantastic. There's a lot of symbolism here.
Yes.
She believes her contact with extraterrestrials has given her a unique artistic ability that she now wants to develop into a career.
The first time I ever did one of these drawings, I just had the urge to get my paper and my pen. Something just sort of came over me and my hand started to move.
Do you actually see anything, or is it just from within you?
Like a downloading of information, I suppose, in a symbolic form. It just sort of seems to feel like it comes through me, it's not from me.
Much more like a sort of radio wave.
Yeah, so it's...
Tracy was interested in art before these illustrations came through, but claims that her style of drawing changed radically overnight.
I mean, this I recognise very much a sort of Aztec type of symbol.
Over a period of time, I spoke to people who study ancient cultures, and these people were able to pinpoint things in the pictures, saying this is something that you could find in a temple in Peru, and this is something you'd find in a temple in Luxor in Egypt.
And can an expert read this?
I've had linguists looking at it, and they say again that it's related to hieroglyphics in ancient Sumerian.
At various times over the past 6 years, Tracy has also produced a series of graphical illustrations, which she claims she later discovered hold a hidden message.
And that circle's dropping over the top of that pyramid.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, and yet again it fits. So these were all done over different periods of time, and yet they all lock together
Yes.
to form a whole. Looking at it just on a purely surface level, there is an element of storytelling.
Apparently this depicts the past and moving into the present and then moving into the future.
And that element of storytelling I can relate to because they have a similarity to stained glass windows and telling a spiritual story.
And the lotus blossoms.
And that bursting forth, yeah. We probably maybe never know the answer of where it comes from and how it gets to be in a pencil at the tip of her hand, but you can't take away from the fact that there is something there.
It's common for abductees to claim to be given special abilities as a result of their experience. Typically, these will include the ability to heal or to be able to pass on messages to humanity.
If in some way the messages that are coming through me can assist other people and the planet that they're connected to, I think it's great.
One of the things that has to always be borne in mind about the abduction experience is that the communication in virtually all these cases is telepathic. So one has to assume that every abductee can pick up thoughts from the aliens and communicate non-verbally. Therefore, that's a basic paranormal gift. Is that something that only abductees have, or is that something that might be more extensively present in the population? We don't really know.
Believers argue that people who return with enhanced psychic abilities provide yet further proof that their experience was real.
People who've had this experience claim that they have unusual powers. But in actual fact, they don't seem able to demonstrate these powers under controlled conditions. If they could, then that would be absolutely amazing. But at the moment, the wider scientific community doesn't even accept that these kind of claimed powers are real.
Skeptics continue to dismiss the types of evidence ufologists and believers have to offer. But can they ignore the medical opinion of a qualified surgeon? Especially one who claims that strange objects he has removed from abductees defy earthly explanation.
We have those which are metallic and covered with this very, very strange membrane. And at the time of surgery, it can't be cut with a surgical blade. It's impervious to cutting.
Rachel Devereaux had her first missing time experience just 3 months ago while driving home. Having looked into the phenomenon, she has decided to take a bold but common step for people who have had this type of encounter.
Hi. Hi.
She's going to have hypnotic regression.
I'm feeling quite nervous about it, about the regression, but also quite excited.
Right, so you might not have done this before, but I've done it a few thousand times.
Rachel's hoping that under hypnosis she can be taken back to when she had her experience and retrieve memories that are not consciously accessible.
I want it to be an honest account, you know, if I do remember.
How do you feel?
Happy.
Yeah. You so feel that, it's okay. It's okay to feel. Stay with it.
It's no walls, it's just black everywhere. It's like standing in the middle of space. There's big bright light here, right in front of me. That's high, and that's watching what the little ones are doing, the small ones going round and looking at us and talking to each other. They think the boys are funny. They think they're funny. I can hear laughing now, the children are laughing, they're really giggling. I'm scared for the children. But the light's there and it's just telling me it's fine and we're not going to hurt them. They're your children. They're your children, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Just feel yourself coming back more and more alert. Good, well done. How do you feel?
Wow. I can't believe how real. That felt.
From my perspective, having completed thousands of regressions over the years, she didn't fabricate that. She didn't pretend to cry.
Speechless. I'm just kind of speechless.
Do I believe everything that happened? I'm sort of 90% there, yeah, that it was real.
Testimonies obtained from abductees under hypnosis often provide compelling, detailed accounts of what happened during their missing time episode. They have given ufologists a mountain of anecdotal evidence to support their claims. But skeptics find these reports unreliable.
The alien abduction phenomenon, I think, is somewhat complicated by the whole debate about hypnosis. Let's be honest, scientists don't even agree on what hypnosis is.
People typically think that hypnotic regression is this kind of magic key for unlocking repressed or hidden memories. In actual fact, it's a great way of producing false memories. It's based on expectations, it's based on imagination, it's all woven together, and then they believe in this narrative.
In the hands of the wrong people, it can be disastrous, and in the hands of the right people, people who know what they're doing, who have adequate controls in place for false memories and things like that, hypnosis is an excellent tool for getting at the truth.
With such a major source of research ignored by skeptics, the need for unequivocal physical evidence is all the more important. In America, a surgeon has come forward with claims which may provide ufologists with the break they've been hoping for.
I started this as the ultimate skeptic. I was then embroiled in the phenomena and shown things that could not be satisfactorily explained by our own science.
Dr. Lear has been a practicing foot surgeon for the past 35 years. But in 1994, he began removing foreign bodies from patients who claimed they were alien implants.
I'm going to numb you up right now. Is that all right? Okay, that's fine. So we're going to numb the area up real good.
A lot of these people have things in their bodies which they've stepped on or they're exposed in a machine shop to a piece of metal.
We'll make a small incision right here, not a big one.
Others, unfortunately, have mental problems and would like to be an abductee.
Since he started in this area 8 years ago, Dr. Lear has conducted 11 operations and claims to have removed an assortment of mysterious objects.
Looks like it to me. Looks black. Yeah. Here it is, here. So let's put in a piece of white gauze. I think this is it. So we're going to x-ray to make sure.
We have those which are metallic and covered with this very, very strange membrane. And at the time of surgery, it can't be cut with a surgical blade. It's impervious to cutting. And researching the pathology books, no such entity has ever been found in the human body.
A logic explanation would be that it's not human tissue, of course.
However, when we get into the metals, that's when we really get into the strange stuff. We had help from the National Institute for Discovery Science, and they sent the first set of specimens to Los Alamos National Labs and to New Mexico Tech. Now, these were blind studies. All the studies are blind, and I mean by that that the laboratories are not told the origin of the specimens. And the best analogy that the scientists were able to make initially were these were very close to meteorites.
The scientific community has generally disregarded Dr. Lear's claims. They feel his studies are inconclusive and are not supervised closely enough to rule out any chance that his samples may have been tampered with.
Metallic object in this container is being sealed.
Dr. Lear stands by his claims and thinks it is the skeptics who are at fault.
I have never met a skeptic yet that didn't know everything about what I was doing and drawn all the conclusion, but has never looked at one shred of the physical evidence or the data.
The moment of truth has arrived for Eric. With the X-ray and ultrasound results returned to the consultant, Eric is about to discover if the lump behind his ear is natural or extraterrestrial.
Il faudra que ce corps médical puisse aussi expliquer comment une telle protubérance peut bouger de 12 mm en 6 mois.
The first thing I want to show you is the ultrasound report and the ultrasound scan. And as you can see here, there is the lesion that we're looking at, and it's just under the surface of the skin. And the appearances of those in keeping with a cyst and nothing else. And when we look at the plain X-ray, there certainly is nothing metallic or anything of a hard consistency in this lump. And this is again in keeping with the diagnosis of a benign cystic lesion. We call it a sebaceous cyst. It's a collection of material from a blocked sweat gland. And it arises when a sweat pore becomes obstructed and the normal sebaceous material is not able to escape and therefore collects under the skin surface and forms a cystic collection.
Could it be possible to have an explanation about how a cyst could move from one point to another one?
There is no easy solution or answer to that problem. All I can speculate is that there may have been an episode of inflammation, which is typical of these cysts. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Oui, l'organisme peut être parfaitement naturel. Or, nous ignorons tout de la technologie des extraterrestres. Donc, on ne peut pas définitivement repousser l'hypothèse que ce soit un implant extraterrestre.
Although Dr. Patel believes his findings are conclusive, Eric remains unconvinced by such an orthodox diagnosis. And his concerns are shared by implant specialist Dr. Lear.
The object is certainly rectangular. The color is not normal for the skin. He claims that it has moved. That certainly negates something being a sebaceous cyst. Sebaceous, the word sebaceous comes from the word sebum, which is a gland attached to a hair follicle. And that becomes inflamed and infected, and that's how you get a sebaceous cyst. They would not move from one hair follicle to another.
If we got one of these implants and it turns out that it's of alien technology or that it's made of materials that wouldn't be easy to find on Earth, then great, it's a fantastic scientific breakthrough.
And after evaluating the information, all that the Russians had acquired on Roswell and on UFOs, Korolev concluded UFOs are real. They appear to be intelligently controlled. That's what he told Stalin, and Stalin in turn said, that's what my other people have concluded as well.
While concrete proof of the conversation does not exist, several Soviet scientific agencies did begin investigating UFOs in the ensuing years.
Stalin, after getting this information about Roswell and UFOs in general, did the same thing basically that the American government had been doing. He condemns UFOs in public and then conducts secret tests behind the scenes. He had all sorts of high-level scientists who would research the problem for him and then report to military officials, all behind the scenes.
Also hidden from public view were UFO reports culled from Soviet Air Force pilots. Between the mid-1950s and mid-1960s, pilots reported approximately 15,000 UFO sightings.
It is very difficult to find a pilot who has been flying for many years and has never seen a UFO.
Most of these sightings can be easily explained. In an era of superpower distrust, flights of American spy planes and spy balloons were common over Soviet skies. But investigative journalist George Knapp, who has viewed portions of the Soviet UFO files, found some of the pilot sightings perplexing.
There were 40 instances where Russian warplanes were sent after UFOs. This is not temperature inversion, this is not a weather balloon, this is not swamp gas, these are craft floating around in the airspace of Russia, and they sent warplanes to go chase them.
While pilots continued to report strange objects in the sky, none could offer tangible evidence to support their claims. But in 1968, over the skies of Riga, Latvia, an alleged UFO sighting was caught on film. As a Soviet propaganda film crew documented a test flight of a fighter interceptor jet, the pilot noticed an unusual object high in the sky.
And suddenly the pilot shouted, "Look, film it!" We looked and saw a triangle at a tremendous height.
Fighter planes scrambled to investigate, but the object quickly disappeared behind a cloud and was never seen again. It was later estimated that the craft was hovering approximately 7 miles above the ground. The film was sent to the Kremlin, where it remained locked from public view for years.
They really took it seriously. I say seriously because the film was taken away. It was declared completely secret.
Outsiders have only recently seen the confiscated film. While some maintain the film is conclusive evidence of a UFO, skeptics argue the vehicle was most likely a French-made high-altitude research balloon. As secrecy enveloped all government discussions of UFO issues, an underground army of Soviet ufologists began to form in the USSR. They kept their studies concealed.
Russians who study UFOs in this period report that they had a very serious feeling of threat from the Soviet government, that they were doing something which the Soviet government disapproved of.
The leader of civilian UFO research was Felix Ziegel, the man considered the father of Soviet ufology.
Felix Ziegel was a Soviet scientist. He was a doctor of mathematics and astronomy at the Moscow Aviation Institute. He made it his job to find out why are the strange objects or in the skies of his country.
Ziegel challenged the Soviet system by conducting paranormal lectures, organizing independent UFO investigations, and urging Soviet citizens to report any and all sightings. His efforts were not without risk.
We cannot say, of course, that people would be put in jail for it, but still Ziegel suffered. He was harassed both in his place of work, at the Institute of Aviation, and he was harassed by the state government authorities.
Ziegel and his investigators spread information about UFO sightings through an underground press network. Samizdat, private publications used to disseminate information, were strictly forbidden by the Kremlin.
In his time, brochures were printed in a samizdat way. They were collections of observations and letters, typed in 5 to 10 copies. All materials were typed with the use of carbon paper.
Samizdat papers were distributed by trustworthy messengers who secretly carried the copies from one person to the next. UFO information circulated in this covert manner until 1967, when suddenly it seemed as if ufologists were given a reprieve from government censure. Today it appears this respite was a smokescreen, part of an intricate government deception. The complex ruse began in 1967 when citizens reported multiple sightings of crescent-shaped UFOs over the skies of the Ukraine and the lower Volga Valley.
It was also seen as far south as the Caucasus Mountains, where many astronomers in observatories in the Caucasus Mountains would see these objects flying horizontally from west to east, crescent-shaped, heading toward the east.
For reasons unknown at the time, the government allowed press coverage and independent study of the sightings. Felix Ziegel was granted permission to form a government-sanctioned investigative committee made up of over 200 scientific and military experts. In October 1967, they convened at the Central House of Aviation and Cosmonautics in Moscow. Their goal? Determine the cause of the mass sightings. On television and in newspapers, Ziegel's committee appealed to Soviet citizens to report information on UFOs. For the first time in Soviet history, UFOs seemed to be an open topic.
It was like a breath of fresh air. Freedom of discussion about a forbidden subject was permitted to the Soviet citizens. And this was something unheard of. And alas, it did not last long.
Within a few months of Ziegel's televised appeal, the steel jaws of Soviet censorship clamped down. Reporting of UFOs was once again off limits. The subject was dropped from the controlled media, and Ziegel's committee was ordered to disband.
The committee was to encourage people to report. As soon as the reports began to gather, somebody in Moscow quashed the activity, canceled the committee, canceled publication of further works, and put a lid on it.
Cries of a Kremlin whitewash were immediately sounded.
Why the cover-up takes place, I don't know. Is there a cover-up? There's no question about it.
But what they were covering up is the question. UFO buffs believe they were covering up alien visitations. I think the evidence is clear they were covering up descriptions of their own secret military aircraft and missile activities and satellite activities.
Scientist and NASA consultant James Oberg came to this conclusion in 1977 after studying Soviet space vehicle launch patterns and comparing them to the dates of the 1967 sightings. He deduced that the crescent-shaped objects witnessed in the sky were not alien in nature, but could be attributed to secret tests of a new Soviet missile warhead.
People in the area saw the rockets, especially at night, saw the streamers, the contrails in the sky, even heard the rockets. They were told by the government that there was nothing there, that it was not anything ours. It became a UFO phenomena.
Later dubbed by the Pentagon as a fractional orbital bombardment system, the Soviets had good reason to keep the tests secret.
It was designed to sneak under our radar as a first strike weapon. It was one of these scary things that you only build it if you mean to make a sneak attack. It was also illegal to have such a weapon because in 1967, the U.S. and Russia and other countries signed a treaty forbidding the placing of nuclear weapons into orbit.
But why, after crushing public dissemination of UFO information for years, did the government briefly loosen its restrictions in 1967? It appears now to have been a deliberate ploy to fool its citizens and the international community about the true nature of the sightings.
The Soviet government did not want the public to understand what was going on. They didn't want the Americans to know, for example, what was going on. It was a useful camouflage. It diverted people's attention. Because it was a UFO, Western journalists would laugh rather than investigate it. The cover-up by the Soviet government is in letting people think they're flying saucers.
The strategy backfired when the extensive UFO data collected by Felix Ziegel's committee was published in magazines.
The Soviet government realized what these reports really were. They're military secrets. Not described accurately, but accurately enough to be of use to the CIA if they ever caught on. The government said, "Oh my gosh," and other things in Russian, and said no more UFO reports get published in the Soviet Union.
For 10 years, public discussion of UFOs was effectively brought to a halt. But that would change in 1977 with the appearance of a strange-looking object over Soviet skies, witnessed by thousands of astonished citizens. September 20th, 1977. As dawn approached in the small Russian port city of Petrozavodsk, a spectacular aerial display lit up the skies. The incident would become one of the most studied UFO sightings in Soviet history.
The phenomenon of Petrozavodsk is one of the greatest abnormal phenomena on the territory of our country.
At approximately 4 o'clock in the morning, civilians and military personnel reported seeing huge star-like apparitions shooting in the sky.
As it flew up in the sky, it appeared to come over the city and then head off toward the horizon. People who were out in the streets of the town saw this blazing jellyfish streaming tentacles down from the saucer-shaped bright core.
The impressive display lasted approximately 10 minutes. Witnesses claimed that a host of strange occurrences on the ground accompanied the sighting.
They reported all sorts of phenomena. They smelled ozone, computers were crashing, drivers lost control of their vehicles and went into ditches.
Perhaps the phenomenon most difficult to explain was the appearance of finely glazed holes in glass windows and rocks around the city.
There is no explanation for this fact, but the connection is direct by the time parameters. There had been no holes before the event, and then they appeared.
Witnessed by thousands, the aerial display above Petrozavodsk was impossible to refute. While the sighting remained a mystery to Soviet citizens, NASA consultant James Oberg quickly discovered its origins.
Because of my connection with the space program and my knowledge of satellites and rockets, I was able to find out within a matter of hours. There was a rocket launching that morning from a secret space center north of Moscow at precisely the time people were seeing this UFO.
The jellyfish-like display was triggered by the launch of the Cosmos 955 spy satellite. As the rocket engine contrails were backlit by the rising morning sun, it produced the tentacle effect observed by witnesses.
So this what they call basically the smoking gun of Soviet ufology. They call it a Medusa or jellyfish UFO because it was streamers of light coming down from the streamers in the rocket engines of the rocket, as it turned out.
As with previous mass sightings, the government had ample reason to keep the truth hidden from Soviet citizens. The satellite was launched from a secret military space center called Plesetsk, one of several undisclosed missile bases scattered throughout the Soviet Union. Most ufologists accept the satellite launch as the cause of the aerial display. But many argue it does not fully clarify the mystery.
How shall we explain the appearance of some beams that burnt the glass? When the pieces of the glass were analyzed at the Institute of Metrology in Moscow, they concluded that these holes resulted from badly glazed window glass. That is, a purely technical defect took place.
I do not believe that the launch of a secret military satellite would explain the holes that were made in the glass. My personal opinion, no, this was not man-made technology that's responsible for such effects.
There were some reports of holes being drilled into glass window panes and in paving stones. I saw those reports. I can't explain it. And all these sorts of additional phenomena, these additional reports, are typical of what happens when people see a very sudden, shocking sight in the sky and look around them for corroborative evidence. Most of the time, it's irrelevant, independent, and sometimes even imaginary.
While the mysterious holes might never be fully explained, the Petrozavodsk incident had much deeper consequences inside the walls of the Kremlin.
The upshot of this incident was the decision of the Soviet government to create a secret program to study UFOs.
In the weeks following the Petrozavodsk sighting, the Soviet Academy of Sciences received inquiries from several European nations concerned about the nature of the event. In response, the Academy of Sciences requested permission from the Kremlin to initiate a top-secret investigation of anomalous occurrences. Although aware the majority of these events were not paranormal in nature, the scientists admitted in their request that they could not provide a scientific basis for all UFO sightings.
The Academy of Sciences can neither ignore or explain the paranormal phenomena similar to that observed in September 1977 in Petrozavodsk. The program was organized to show that we did not know the answers to these questions and would be studying it on the scientific level. That was the way the official scientific program for studying abnormal phenomena and extraterrestrial flying objects started its work in the Soviet Union.
In 1978, the investigation that later became known as Institute 22 was formally started. The study lasted 13 years and was completely concealed from public view. But why did the Soviet government spend time and money to investigate a phenomenon it already knew the origins of?
There's really no surprise that the Soviet military, even if they understood the nature of most of these reports, would still investigate them. The Soviets traditionally spied on themselves as severely as they spied on the West.
If they already knew that these are missile tests, why do they have to have a nationwide study behind the scenes? I mean, it's not like the results of the study were ever going to be published anywhere. It was a secret. So it makes no sense.
While the rationale for the beginnings of the study is still debated, there is no doubt the scope of the investigation was far-reaching. The Institute 22 inquiry was conducted jointly between the Soviet Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Defense.
It was very useful for the Academy of Sciences to collaborate and to carry out studies together with the Ministry of Defense, because naturally it was much easier for the Ministry of Defense to get the information we had no access to.
The armed forces were ordered to study what, if any, influence possible UFOs might have on the proper functioning of technical military equipment. In addition, hundreds of thousands of sailors, soldiers, and pilots were recruited to watch for and report on UFOs. No one was told why the reports were being taken.
The Ministry of Defense has an enormous observance potential. First, military units are located all over the country. Second, unlike civil organizations, an order from the Minister of Defense is sufficient for making a potential viewer of each military man, and this was done.
Every single unit in the vast Soviet military empire had to comply with this study. That is, any UFO, any anomalous object, any ball of light, any strange thing in the sky whatsoever had to be fully investigated.
Scientists were directed to investigate the physical nature of alleged paranormal phenomenon. The data collected by the military and scientists was analyzed in a lab located in a nondescript building in a suburb of Moscow.
The personnel of the laboratory were not numerous. Not more than 10 people, and this number was never exceeded. But the specialists from almost all the scientific areas worked there, from a physician to specialists in radioelectronics, meteorology, and astrogeophysics. Practically all the specialists were represented there. It was done in order to study all possible aspects of UFOs.
6 years into the study, Institute 22 would be called on to scrutinize an incident of global consequence, when a suspected UFO incident placed the world on the brink of nuclear war. The early 1980s were a time of tense relations between the Soviet Union and the West. The era of détente had ended, and the Russian landscape was studded with intercontinental ballistic missile silos. Each contained nuclear weapons aimed westward. It was at one of these silos that a reported UFO incident caused a nuclear scare. Today, this ICBM silo in the Ukraine is deserted, dismantled in compliance with a nuclear arms reduction treaty between the US and USSR. But at this silo in 1982, something went terribly wrong. It started at approximately 6 p.m. when soldiers and villagers in the nearby town of Bielo-Korovichi witnessed a strange object in the dusk sky. A military officer at the time described what he saw.
I was riding a motorcycle not far from here. I saw a large object in the air. It had a perfect geometric shape.
At the same moment inside the silo, an emergency warning light indicated that a nuclear missile had switched to launch mode.
The most telling testimony comes from the communications officer who said that somehow something entered the correct code.
But Moscow had not ordered a launch, nor had any personnel in the bunker touched the control panel. For 15 agonizing seconds, technicians frantically scrambled to stop the launch. Then, without explanation, the launch sequence was aborted.
They were ready for launch. The UFO, poof, goes away. Poof, the command control module goes back to normal.
Had a UFO somehow interfered with the launch controls of a nuclear missile? A team of investigators from Institute 22, the secret state-sponsored UFO research team, was immediately ordered to the missile base.
They established within a very short period, literally half a day, that a military training exercise took place at a nearby aerial ground.
Investigators learned that the sighting occurred at the same time and in the same area where the military was testing flares. Dropped out of planes, the flares provided 5 to 7 minutes of illumination. That explained the strange display in the sky. But why did the nuclear launch sequence activate?
The fact that the emergency situation coincided with the effects which took place is certainly a remarkable coincidence, but it is still a coincidence.
The ICBM control equipment was systematically taken apart and rebuilt, but no defects were found.
It's not just an electrical malfunction. Something entered the correct launch codes. That just doesn't happen every day. We hear from our government UFOs are not a matter of national security. The Russian government has been telling its people the same thing. They're trying to confuse us. This incident is clear evidence, if ever there was, that UFOs do carry national security implications.
After examining the ICBM episode, the investigative team of Institute 22 continued to scrutinize various sightings around the country. Some who reported UFOs had a much closer view than those on Earth. Cosmonauts.
The first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, is quoted in the Thread 3 documents as saying, "I can tell you that UFOs are real, and if you allow me, I'll tell you a lot more." The second man in space, cosmonaut Titov, said that there were 7 UFOs dancing around his space capsule during his brief flight into space.
However, even to this day, most cosmonauts are reluctant to speak about any unusual phenomenon they witnessed in space.
There's a ridicule factor, there's the laughter curtain, there are career consequences from reporting a UFO and taking it seriously.
But in this rare interview obtained by the History Channel, 2 cosmonauts spoke of unusual objects they encountered in space.
Many cosmonauts have seen phenomena which are far beyond the experiences of Earthmen. For 10 years, I never spoke of such things.
Former Commander Vladimir Kovalyonik of the Salyut 6 space station revealed that on May 5, 1981, he observed an unrecognizable illuminated entity outside the porthole of his craft.
The object had an elliptical shape and flew with us. It only flew straight, but then a kind of explosion happened. It produced a golden light, very beautiful to watch. A second explosion followed, and 2 spheres appeared. As we entered the darkness of Earth's shadow, I could no longer see them.
On a Mir mission in 1991, cosmonaut Musa Manarov managed to videotape an anomalous object during a routine docking procedure.
I was looking out the biggest window. It was directly in front of me. I am familiar with the construction of all spaceships, but this was different.
There is ongoing debate about sightings of unidentified objects by cosmonauts and American astronauts alike. Skeptics insist there is enough debris left in orbit to constitute a plethora of unusual sightings. As cosmonauts traveled amidst the stars, the 1990s saw major changes take place on Soviet soil. When the walls of communism crumbled, American UFO investigator George Knapp ventured to Russia.